a AV board from a Champions pub. And some of the sounds won't play because the interface between my Attack from Mars MPU and the AV board is different, so this is normal. You could test the whole thing by adding a Champions Pub ROM to my game here, but this is good enough to show that sounds are working. Now, what did I do to this board? It had issues with the high voltage section, so I've rebuilt the entire high voltage section. There are 4 capacitors, 6 capacitors really, that should be changed. I don't recommend a novice doing this, but these 2 10K caps, which are snap caps, should be changed out. And quite frequently, both on this board and on a DCS soundboard, people attempting that will pull the through holes, which results in a very loud buzz when you power on. And then these 4 1 microfarad caps, those are in series on the sound, in the sound section, so I always change those also. So this one is good to go. Well, I finally licked this Champion Pub MPU board that originally it was sent with light corrosion on the battery holder, and when I removed the battery holder I found quite a bit more than light corrosion. Now this is, maybe we call this moderate corrosion, but all of this has been sanded to bare copper and then conformal coated. Had to replace some of these discrete components, these resistors and capacitors, and this IC here. I can't see it with my glasses on, but normally that's an LS14. I updated the game ROM to the latest version 1.5 and installed NVRAM. The thing that was kicking my rear end for a while was it would boot with a G10 error, and G10 of course is a security chip. So I tried to boot it with my Attack from Mars ROM and a security chip, and it said the same thing. So I knew there was some problem with the circuitry to this security chip, which kind of acts as a traffic cop inside the switch matrix. I consulted with a good friend of mine, who I shall not name because he'll be deluged with requests for help, but he suggested focusing on U24 and U14, and that made sense when I reviewed the schematic. What I found after probing both these chips with my logic probe was that pin 3 on this 74 HC574 was stuck high, and that didn't make any sense. It's a buffer chip. What goes into the chip should match what goes out of the chip once the clock and chip selects are toggled. So I pulled that chip off cleanly and then installed a socket and a new chip for my inventory, and we are good to go. Also sent with it was the power driver board. Typical power driver board activity here or affair. This was one of the early ones, early driver board, which seems strange now that I think about it, because Champion Pub I thought was late in the production cycle. But anyway, these original driver boards came with 6A2 diodes in series with 2 of the general illumination circuits. Those diodes were placed there to reduce the voltage a little bit, because the voltage drop across a silicon diode is about 0.7 volts, so 2 of them in series were dropping it by 1.4 volts, theoretically to preserve general illumination. Later games they use 0 ohm jumpers or wire jumpers at these locations and got rid of the 6A2 diodes completely. I have used the Pinwiki technique, which calls for an installation of a jumper from these top 2 pins of the GI AC input to a couple of the pins down here on this output, and that effectively does the same thing as having all those jumpers there. And that's on the back side of the board, of course. The rest of this board, well, I replaced the power input headers, the general illumination input and output headers, and the most critical is 5-volt and 12-volt header at the top left of the board. We booted it. We're not in a Champions pub, so we get that message. Now we're going to check out all the features of both an MPU and the driver board, and of course I don't have a soundboard connected, so that's normal also. We'll test switches first. Champions pub does not use column 8, so let's make sure that all the rest of these are in fact used, and it looks like we are good to go here. Let me get some row 8 action in here. There we go. Row 8. So all those switches are working fine. These are the coin door switches. All good. Let's go to the solenoid test. And I will advance it to running. And we are 100% operational there. I want to, use some of the flipper circuits there. Let me see this solenoid. This will be interesting. This is solenoid 6. Solenoid 6 is a post power. It seemed like it wanted to gradually raise that power up there, so that's fine. All right, let's test the general illumination, keeping in mind there are only 3 dimmable circuits in a WPC 95 game configuration, so those are all working correctly. We'll do lamps and flashers at the same time. Perfecto. So we are good to go. This one I was really beginning to wonder with that security chip issue whether or not there's a tiny trace fractured up here or something, but it looks like it was something else completely. Thanks so much for sending them.